Hi everyone, it's Kristen from Altitude Advisory, and today I'm joined by David Trim from Hall Chadwick. So he heads up the Insolvency and Business Recovery practice here in Adelaide. I'll let you speak in a minute, Dave. I just wanted to give a little bit of a chat about how I suppose the government handed down their budget recently, and what we've seen are a series of spending and non-spending assistance for businesses. Mm-hmm. It's all about getting businesses moving again. Yep. Things, as far as we've seen, aren't troubled yet. The new insolvency measures, I've got you in here, Dave, to talk to us about for our clients, but also those that aren't clients, who don't have someone looking out for them like we do for our clients. I know you're that kind of guy. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you do when it comes to insolvency and voluntary liquidation?
I can, yes. So we have a few different mechanisms that we use, and we can provide a few different options when we get approached. So the typical scenario will be one of two different directions. The standard wind-up application process will happen with a director who wants to essentially put the affairs of the company to bed, but it may be a bit too complicated for their advisor or for them to do it themselves. So we'll happily assist in that process. Also, the other mechanism is to restructure. So it's probably a big part of what's going to come out in the future is the small and medium businesses who, for whatever reason, it can be a myriad of reasons, find themselves in a position where it's either untenable to trade on in its current state. They want to downsize, they can see the writings on the wall, and they want to move forward proactively and talking to the right people and doing the right thing by their creditors and their business and their employees.
Right, thank you. So what are you seeing right now?
About a 70 to 80% downturn in formal appointments nationally. That's including the Eastern Seaboard and WA. The nature of that tells me that the tide is coming out by way of actions where action should be taken. This is why there's a fair bit of talk about a tsunami of insolvencies. So that seems troubling, but I find it more troubling that action is not being taken because at the moment the HO is not doing any formal wind-ups where previously they would be taking 150 businesses out of commission every month. Yeah. And for us as an economy, that's not great because it means that those companies are hanging on and racking up credit where they shouldn't be with no intention of paying those debts back.
Yeah, so really concerning.
Those zombie companies are the ones that are going to cause trouble for the economy. The viable businesses that do the right thing and pay their tax on time and deal with their problems when they do up front, they're the businesses we want to try and help move through these difficult periods.
So that moratorium, I suppose, that the government put in place on just keeping everyone operating, solvent or not solvent, you see as a big problem going forward?
It has delayed the inevitable somewhat. The law changes didn't cover everything. It's not a panacea, unfortunately, for just doing what you want, but the sentiment from the government was such that we're the government overseeing the economy and we want to give you a bit of breathing space for small and medium businesses, and that's been somewhat effective with the JobKeeper stimulus, and that's been great, but on the whole, as I said, the moratorium doesn't cover everything. So there are other provisions of the Corporations Act where if you are borderline insolvent and you're not sure but you think that you've got a panacea to cover you off on incurring debts during this period, you may want to seek some proper legal and financial advice about that because moving forward, you may find if there's a liquidation in place, a liquidator may come knocking still for whatever reasons. So,
so suppliers should be especially wary.
I think suppliers in any situation should be wary of their risks. It's obviously a risk to lend money, but in this instance, yes, absolutely. There are things you can do to mitigate that, so credit insurance and PPSR registrations and the like. So, yeah, absolutely.
So as far as percentages on what you're seeing in businesses, Eastern Seaboard, South Australia, how are we doing?
70 to 80% down from last year.
Here in South Australia?
In South Australia, I think it might even be worse. I think it's like 80 or 90%. As far as the number of appointments that have taken place, significantly down than they were 12 months ago. But then we've always had a sentiment that's a little slower than usual compared to the Eastern Seaboard. So when all these changes that we're talking about, we will continue to talk about it shortly, taking place, the South Australian business sentiment has been lagging somewhat. So post-GFC, we saw our peak in 2011, 2012 with the insolvency appointments, whereas I think there's a prediction that next year will be a big glut of insolvency appointments, basically people hanging up their boots, whereas we may not see that for another year or two in South Australia, but we'll wait and see what happens.
Okay, so as far as you mentioned new rules and insolvency rules, so trading insolvent has always been something as, I suppose, specialists in this field that we don't want people to be doing.
No, yep.
It's apparent that we're allowed to do it. What do the new changes look like?
The proposed plans, even though there's not much on the table yet by way of detail and specificity, the government wants to essentially instigate a plan where the director or the person running the business will stay in charge of the business while someone such as myself goes in on a fixed fee for up to 20 business days and sets up a proposal to restructure the company's debts so that it can continue to trade out of its position. And then at that 20-day mark, it gets put to creditors and they have 15 business days to review and consider and either accept or reject the proposal. Once that happens, if it's accepted, then the business can continue on with this proposal plan in place. Otherwise, if it's rejected, it can go into what they're calling a light liquidation version or a voluntary administration. So there are some issues behind the lack of detail right now. A lot of practitioners are concerned about that lack of detail and the short time in which they're planning to pass these laws. Yeah. 1 January is not far away once you factor in the Christmas period and the need to get through Parliament, etc. So wait and see. But that's the plan, is to allow directors more control in the process to restructure.
In order to keep businesses going, to keep the economy going, because of course small business makes up the majority of business in Australia.
Precisely, 98% of businesses in Australia are small businesses.
Yeah, and there really are some people struggling. So what would you recommend if a person is struggling? Obviously we look out for our clients like they're our own, like I mentioned. So we would recognise and refer to you if the case may be. But for those that aren't our clients and don't have someone looking out for them, at what point would you want to see someone to make a plan? And I'm presuming leaving it to the last second isn't the right thing.
That's exactly right. That's the sentiment. I like to consider that I'm a pretty decent bloke, so any time really. But at the end of the day, the decision to have a chat with us would work in conjunction with your advisors if you've got them. I know a lot of people go to their trusted business contacts, but not necessarily to their banker anymore, but historically that would be their avenue. But you'd be talking to your financial planner or your accountant and saying, well, here's the writing on the wall. My forecasts say that because of the revenue projection, I really need to get someone in and help me out with this situation. And we'll happily have a chat, and it doesn't always have to end in a formal appointment. There are discussions that we can facilitate around turnaround and restructuring and safe harbour advice where the business can survive and the director can put himself into a position that he's feels safe and comfortable. Yeah,
so it's really not about shutting everyone down. It's about making sure that we get the best outcome for the client.
That doesn't make any sense for me as a civilian to shut businesses down and come in and rape and pillage, because at the end of the day, I'm a civilian and I still need to pay taxes, and I want the cafe and the restaurant down the road to be open so that I can go and use those services. And as a practitioner, it may mean less money in my pocket, but at the end of the day, it makes sense for us as an economy as a whole to try and do our best to keep these businesses alive when they're viable. Yeah,
you can understand what the fright is amongst the people who run small businesses. It's scary when you hear an insolvency expert or a liquidation expert. That sounds really frightening, but it doesn't have to be.
No, the public sentiment, I'm well aware of that. You know, we are seen as corporate undertakers or vampires, and it's an attitude I'd like to change, but obviously you're talking 20 million people, so that's quite difficult. But one step at a time, and the message for us is we are trained professionals with honed professional skills in the distress area. And much the same as an oncologist would be specialist in their area. If you get a broken foot, you go to a doctor. If your leg falls off, you need some serious help. So that's where we end up on the scale of assistance when you're talking about distress. Yeah.
How many legs have you seen fall off?
Quite a few in my time. It's a few years now. So it is what it is. Yeah. Oh.
Thank you so much, David, for joining us and filling us in on that. I know that lots of clients and those that aren't our clients will be interested too. This is a scary time. There's a lot to watch going forward. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me.